Welcome. Thanks for joining. Kathleen is recording for me. Thank you, Kathleen. And let's see, how many people do we have here so far?
So you can start your intro over if you want.
I'll start my intro. Okay. All right. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. We appreciate you being here. We are so excited to welcome our friends from Microsoft here to talk about interviewing. And I just wanted to, it just seems appropriate for me to take a quick moment to acknowledge that there are a lot of distractions in the world, and especially with what's happening in Ukraine and even other parts of the world. And we know that people are suffering, and there's racism, genocide, lots of terrible disasters. But if we just want to recognize that you might need extra support, and if you do, I'll put a link in the chat that the university is offering. And anyway, we're just, if you're suffering in any way, we're thinking about you, even though this meeting is all happy and exciting. Just seems so incongruous. But anyway, on to happier things. I want to welcome our friends from Microsoft, and I'll start by, let's see, maybe could you quickly introduce yourselves? Chelsea, should we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Chelsea, and I lead the university recruiting efforts for a few of our pipelines for both summer internships and then new grads looking for full-time roles. So the pipelines I work on are the program management / product management role, as well as the user experience pipeline, which includes like product design, user research, technical writing / like content design, things like that. And I've been at Microsoft for about 7 years now.
Thanks. And now we have James T.
All right. Hi, James T. I'm a principal design manager on the Azure Cognitive Services team. And this is a team that develops AI capabilities and services for developers to incorporate AI, the ability to hear, speak, see, and understand the world around them into the endpoints that they are building. So thank you.
Thank you. Jazz, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Jazz. I was previously from HCDE master's program last year. I graduated then, and I'm now working at Microsoft Xbox as a designer too. And I'm working on basically, Xbox console, cloud gaming, all the different pretty interesting products, and looking forward to this chat with you.
Thanks, Jazz. And Jazz, you finished in 2019 or 20?
Last year.
Last year. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And then many of you might recognize Hansen. Hansen, do you want to take a turn?
Hello, it's been a while, but my name is Hansen. And right now I'm currently working as a UX researcher at Microsoft in the supply chain space. So I'm working on this product called Intelligent Order Management. And it's a really cool, fascinating product in the enterprise area, and that is looking into the supply chain area. So,
all right, thanks. So what we're going to do today is Chelsea will give an overview of the recruiting process, and then James and Hansen and Jazz will talk about portfolios, and then we'll talk more about the interview process, and then do a couple mock interview questions, and then finish off with some Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea for the next 5 or so minutes to talk about the recruiting overview.
Yes, awesome. So as I mentioned, I lead a few of our recruiting pipelines. So I'll kind of give you guys an overview of those, since I think they are pretty relevant for the HCDE people in the crowd, as well as any other kind of design folks we have in the crowd. So basically, I run product management / program management, which is great for those of you who kind of want to work more closely with engineers and work on kind of like the business side of things, have good kind of project management organizational skills. And that role, we are still recruiting a few full-time candidates. We are pretty full on summer internships for that role right now, but if you guys are still interested in full-time roles, then I would definitely encourage you to apply for the program management / product management. And then the other pipeline, which I think we're talking more about today, is the user experience pipeline, which includes like product design, user research. We even have a few kind of like technical writers, content designers, that role. So I hire interns and full-timers as well. It's kind of the opposite of product management, where right now we just have a few intern positions left, and unfortunately all the full-time positions, the current university ones are full. Sometimes there are last-minute openings, so I always encourage people, if you just go to www.careers.microsoft.com, you can set up job alerts for like entry level, user researcher positions, whatever it is. If you are someone who is graduating, there may be new openings posted, but generally all the ones that kind of I have ownership over are unfortunately full. But again, sometimes things pop up. I would say that in general, I don't know who we have in the audience, if most of you guys are seniors or grad students or sophomores, freshmen, etc. I would say if any of you guys are underclassmen, like freshman, sophomore, know that, oh, it's not, we don't have any really underclassmen. Okay. Is it
juniors, maybe juniors and seniors?
Mainly juniors and seniors,
but
okay.
Mostly masters. I assume, I'm thinking mostly masters.
And masters. Yeah, so I would say in general, Microsoft, for the design roles, we mainly hire summer interns, and then a lot of our summer interns fill up the full-time jobs for kind of like their return offers. So I would say strategically, if you want to get into Microsoft, look out for summer internship openings. Those are usually posted in the early fall, so about August, September timeframe is a really good time to be looking out for those summer internship openings for the next summer. What else we do? So yeah, careers.microsoft.com or microsoft.com/university. I'll post those links in the chat. That's where you can kind of review all of our openings. For those of you who guys are applying, the main thing is to have your resume updated when you apply, and to have your digital design portfolio linked on your resume, because those are the two things that our recruiting team and our hiring managers are looking at right away before they even bring you into interviews. So the process is basically you apply online, your resume and portfolio is reviewed, and that happens on a rolling basis. So as I mentioned, we still do have a few summer internships open in the design space and a few full-time positions open in the product management space. So like even right now, we're going through some of the more recent applicants and reviewing those resumes and design portfolios. And then we shortlist the ones that are most interesting for the roles that we have open at the moment, and send those candidates into first round screens. Typically the first round screen, and if you're selected for a screen, you'll hear typically via email from our recruiting team to schedule that screen. Those are about 30 minutes, usually a phone call, either with a hiring manager that has experience in the role that you're interested in, or sometimes with just a recruiter who's kind of going over your experience. And then after the first round screens, we select candidates for final round interviews, and that's what used to be known as the on-site interview. And that is kind of like the full day interview that includes, which is I think what we're kind of going to be diving a little more deeply in this session, since that's like the meatiest interview you'll go through with Microsoft. That is typically going to include a portfolio review presentation where candidates are expected to kind of prepare a little bit about their experience, what they've learned from different design projects they've worked on. A lot of times candidates will share, PowerPoint decks or some kind of like prepared presentation for the design manager audience. So typically there's like a panel of people in your presentation while you're presenting. And then you'll have, sometimes it's typically between like 3 to 4 one-on-one interviews with each members of most likely your potential team that you'll be joining. And so we'll go in more into kind of what to expect in those kind of interviews and what kind of questions, and how to prepare your portfolio for a presentation, what should you put in your portfolio, all of that. But yeah, hopefully that provides a decent overview. I think we're saving most of the questions till the end, but if anyone on the panel that I missed anything on the recruiting overview, please jump in.
Thanks, Chelsea. And I guess you can always put a question in the chat
Yeah.
for Chelsea. Chelsea, are you able to see the chat?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see the chat. So yeah,
Okay, if they're quick and
I'll-
easy questions, maybe Chelsea can answer in the chat. All right, let's go on to James now, who can talk about the portfolio process. Take it away.
Sorry, I'm used to Teams, so I'd have to refind all the buttons in Zoom. Jazz is laughing, I can see that. And so is Hansen. Anyway, so there, as Chelsea went through, typically somebody applies, we see the application as a hiring. So I'm a hiring manager, I hire all the time. I also do a lot of recruiting. So from a portfolio perspective, I look at two things. One, I want to see the type of work that you've done. I'm typically looking for a fit. Did you do the type of work that the position entails? And what I'm also looking for, and this is more important, we'll get into a little bit more of a portfolio review, is did you actually understand what the problem was, right? Did you uncover any insights? And how did you present that work within your portfolio? So in the past, portfolios have been a lot about aesthetics. But as you move more into UX and product design, aesthetics are normally and typically now defined by the system that you're designing within, right? If you're designing apps within Google's material design, for example, or Microsoft's Fluent design, a lot of the controls, a lot of the patterns that you may be using are established by that design system. So it isn't really about necessarily the aesthetics of things. It's really about, did you solve the usability issue? Did you understand the usability issue? Did you identify it? Did you do your research in a way that uncovered insights? And were you able to communicate that within your portfolio in a really compelling way, right? So as a reviewer of portfolios, I might look at, I don't know, 10 or 15 portfolios a week, right? I'm giving it a quick cursory view initially. I want to see, okay, does this person have skills? Do they have experience? Are they able to communicate the projects that they worked on in a way that makes sense to me as somebody quickly reviewing it, right? So be cognizant of being able to set up your portfolio in a way that tells a story of what you've accomplished. So the other thing I would say is a portfolio is not a dissertation on the classes that you took. Say you're a student, you're a master's student, and you took a class, and that class went through a typical design process where you did a discovery, you facilitated some research, you created a project plan, and you executed a project plan, and you ended up with deliverables, and here are the deliverables. You have to assume that folks like me on the managing side or the hiring side, we're experts in our field. We are well versed in the design process. I'm not interested in looking at a portfolio that regurgitates what I do on a daily basis. I'm looking at portfolios that really are able to show that you as an interviewee or you as a potential candidate, you understand customer insights, you understand usability issues, and you applied the process to come up with a compelling solution, right? So, so that's kind of the first pass, is to look at your portfolio. Are you able to communicate those types of things and show it in a really compelling way? That, and compelling, I mean engaging, well-written, concise, visually appealing, right? While it isn't necessarily, especially for UX portfolio reviews, it isn't about visual design. We're not expecting everybody to be, pure play visual designers. We are expecting a certain level of execution and polish, right? And so there is a quality bar that we're looking for folks to meet, even though visual design isn't necessarily the primary deliverable. Like if you have something that's beautifully designed, but it's hard to comprehend, you kind of miss the boat, right? And those are the types of things that I'm quickly evaluating on portfolios. So you go through the process, you submit a portfolio that's really compelling, engaging. I definitely can see that you have skills, that you understand projects, you understand usability, you understand how to solve problems. The next step would be a portfolio review. And at a portfolio review, they're about an hour, of which you have about 45 minutes to present, right? So it's one of the things that I look at in a portfolio review is, do you understand the time constraint of 45 minutes to present yourself in a concise, compelling way, right? The time constraint is actually one of the things that we're looking at. The other thing that we look at is, did you pick your best work? Did you pick the things that really highlight your skills and your strengths? And then did you apply the things that I talked about earlier? Did you apply processes to uncover insights, right? Did you apply the process to develop a plan to act on those insights, right? Did you discuss or share what you learned from that process? And were you able to clearly communicate not the outcome, but the impact of the outcome? I designed this, which created this for the user. I'm more interested in the impact that it created than the actual artifact, right? Did it move the bar? Did it improve something? Right. And now I'm also interested in a portfolio review, and we'll oftentimes ask this, is like, what did you learn? What did you uncover, right? What surprised you? What caused you to think differently? How did you solve for that? And then the last kind of stumper question we'll throw in is, what would you do different, right? If I didn't have the time constraint, I would have done this. If I had, more funding, we would have done this, or would have really loved to spend more time finding more research respondents to get better insights, and based on that, I would have done this. So, yeah.
Thanks. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to choose
Sure.
one of you, Jazz or Hansen. Do you think, whichever one of you, Jazz or Hansen, is comfortable talking, could you talk about your process for presenting your portfolio? Either one of you? Looks like Jazz is ready to talk. If that's okay, Hansen.
Hansen, do you want to take this or?
Doesn't matter. You can go first.
Okay. Actually, I think James really hit all the right, kind of like reinforces what I was kind of thinking about this as well. I think for me, like when I was kind of preparing for my portfolio, I was very cognizant of picking 2 or 3 portfolio pieces that really like highlights and tell the story of like me as a designer, each of it telling an important attribute about me as an individual. For example, like a project that talks about like how I use design thinking strategies to build customer empathy with my stakeholders and partners can be a good way to kind of show like your ability to align business stakeholders thinking with design, for example. And I kind of think about like the 2 or 3 portfolios showcasing like a different theme of like me and my abilities. So each of them kind of illustrating a different story about the project and my role in that project. And then at the same time, like those 2 or 3 projects should have a very strong like so what kind of a factor in it, like after you have done all those things, what is that impact to that solution or like what you did. So even if there isn't any like metrics or stuff like that, so what I did was to actually like include anecdotal evidence, like quotes from customers or quotes from participants, for example. And Hansen.
Yeah, I think just to add on top of that, really just talk with your recruiter and try to get as much information about what the team that's hiring, what kind of stage they are, why they're hiring, because obviously every hiring manager is different, right? Like they might have a different needs for that particular moment that they're really looking for. For example, like even though I'm a researcher, recently we've been hiring designers, and our design manager also looped me in just to see if the like whoever is interviewing, if they are matching well with the team's energy and providing extra or like synergy and also like knowledge that we need as a team. So like really talk with your recruiter, try to understand what the team needs at that moment or what they're working on, things like that, if you could, and then follow like the strategies that I think Jazz and James was talking about before.
Thanks. Great comments, everyone. Chelsea, is there anything more you want to talk about with respect to the actual interview process, or what do you think?
If there's questions, I can definitely cover them, but I definitely have covered what I think.
Okay. Well, then I'll ask you one. There's one question here. It says, are there any constants you look for? Oh no, this is back to the portfolio. I'll quickly answer this question since we're back on time now. This is more for James. Are there any constants you look for in a portfolio? For example, in applying for a design role, would you suggest having at least one mobile phone design piece?
It really depends on the type of work that you're applying for. I think this goes back to Hansen's comment around making sure that your portfolio represents your best capability based off of the opportunity of the job you're applying for, right? This is where it's really up to you as a candidate to do your homework, right? And so for folks that would be interviewing in my organization, we don't do mobile, so it isn't really important. What we do a lot of, though, is systems design. So if mobile is a great way to illustrate, say, the flexibility of a design system you're working on, that it was responsive, yeah, then show it. But we're not hiring you for mobile. We're hiring you for the ability of your system thinking, right? So there's not a pat answer. It's really that you need to adapt your story to the opportunity and make sure your skill set is matching as best you can the opportunity at hand.
Thanks. Jazz and Hansen, would you mind giving everyone an overview of your own interview experience with Microsoft? How that worked for you? You want to go? Who wants to go first? Jazz again.
I can take this one first and then pass it to Jazz. For me, I started off as a contractor. Technically, I'm still a contractor, but I am converting to full-time sometime next month. But in terms of my interview process, it's very different. Even for contractors, for me, I actually went through the whole 5-hour interview process as a contractor, just because my organization really took that process for a UX researcher role really seriously. So they took the time to allow me to meet with every or like the major collaborators of my team to kind of get a sense of what they're looking for and also what I'm capable of showing my work to them. So and then obviously we had the portfolio review, that 1 hour sessions. After that, there was like I think 4 one-on-ones for me. But I've heard for other contractors that from other teams, they might have a shorter interview loop. They might only talk with the hiring managers and things like that. So it could vary for contractors. But then as I interview for my full-time positions, I went through the same thing. But for me, my team, it was a bit more relaxed since I already know most of the people on my team and I was interviewing for the same position. So that was kind of just, redoing my interview process as a like way back when I was a contractor. So that was my experience.
Very thorough. Jazz, what was your experience like?
Yeah, for me, I actually interviewed with Microsoft in person. So I had kind of like a more in-person interviewing experience. It was kind of like set up with a more informational call at the beginning, like a few weeks out. And then after that, on that in-person day, it was kind of similar to what Hansen's experience is, but we had like a portfolio presentation in the morning. Actually quite early in the morning for mine. It was like 8 a.m. I remember that vividly. And 8 a.m. portfolio presentation. And then we had basically like a loop interview. I think I had like 5 interviewers back to back until I think it was like 3 p.m. around there. We also had this kind of like a whiteboarding exercise during one of the interviewers, but I don't think I'm not so sure, but I don't think that is in virtual interviews right now. So that was my interview process.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that I've spoken to James about this, but each team at Microsoft has their own attitude about whiteboarding. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have a second to say anything about that, James? It just varies depending on the team, right?
Yeah, it varies upon the team. I think that I typically don't use it. I like to rely on my ability to screen and interview. And, if you make the vetting process and you're actually in their interview loop, that is the stress test in and of itself. So.
Okay. And I'll put a link to what whiteboarding is in the chat. I'll find something in a minute. But first, I'm going to actually, James, maybe you want to throw out some mock interview questions to
Sure.
Jazz and Hansen and then see how they handle it and maybe critique them.
Yeah, so just a little bit of context. Oftentimes when you go through a loop, and so typically there would be your first part of it would be a portfolio review. So that's about the 45 minutes, right? And then after that, you would have one-on-one in-depth interviews. And those one-on-one in-depth interviews are typically, each person is kind of assigned different things to query, right, to ask questions about. And so we selected some to ask. And so I'm going to ask, I guess, Jazz first. This is a sample question of maybe what I'll do is ask the question, then we can talk about what we're looking for afterwards. How's that sound? Melissa, sound good?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, okay. All right, so Jazz, thank you for coming in. I wanted to start off by asking you a question of, give me an example of a time when you suggested a way of designing something and customers reacted differently than you expected. How did this impact your designs?
Yeah, that's a great question. But by the way, I'm kind of like thinking about like as a student, new fresh grad, that kind of thinking. Okay, so for me, like I feel like this question really made me thought about like one of the challenges that I face in my capstone project. So like in our project, our capstone sponsor, Google, was kind of like really interested to find out about how might we kind of make quantum computing more intuitive for students. And so interestingly, like none of our teammates actually or us knew anything about quantum computing. So while other like teams were doing like research, we actually like took a step back and kind of put ourselves in the shoes of like students new in the field. So we were actually taking some time to study about the basic quantum computing concepts. And then after that, we came after immersing ourselves and after the research and everything, we actually thought that we saw the light on this like initial prototype that we have. So we basically designed this add-on for a quantum computing notebook that actually breaks down several math concepts and stuff. And we thought that it actually met the needs of like 80% of like quantum computing learners. But actually, to our surprise, like when we ran through the prototype with some quantum computing students, we realized that each of them actually sees the data displayed on the prototype very differently from the way like it was displayed. Like each of them like wants to see it in a different kind of like layout or different format. And it also varies across like different stages of their learning journey. And so like what we did was that we actually sat down with the next few students and immediately kind of like adapted the way we interviewed. So instead of like giving this kind of interview questions, we actually gave them like a list of different data visualization tools and asked them to arrange it to their likings. And it actually gave us this like aha moment when we knew that this design solution has to have this core principle, which is to flexibly customize to grow with the student. So that was kind of like that adaptation that we make to our design solution, and eventually that kind of design, our final design solution actually saw that impact with a lot of different groups of students, not just early in quantum computing, but students could kind of grow with our solution as they kind of use and adapt the notebook to their needs. Yeah. Do you have any questions for me about this?
Yeah. So Melissa, do you want us to go through that? Or?
Sure, yeah, while it's fresh in your mind. Yeah, that'd be great. Sure.
Yeah, so thank you. That was really great. You'd mentioned adapting your process mid-cycle, right?
Yeah.
What implications did that have based off of the research that you had done previously? Did that negate the research that you'd done previously, or did it cause you just to focus with your new respondents?
So I don't think it negated the research that we had done previously, because we actually adopted a very agile research approach, because we knew that it's not like deploying that kind of research process for like 8 students. If it doesn't give us the result immediately for like the first 2 or like 3 or 4 students at the beginning, we should kind of adapt in a very agile approach. So what we did was that the first 2 students, we adopted a more like interviewee approach, first 2 or 3. Then we kind of adapted that research approach to make it more suited to the questions that we wanted to ask in that process. And it actually helped to mutually inform each another's like research process and goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Great.
So James, what do you think? Strengths, weaknesses?
Oh, it was a great answer. And so these are the types of things that I'm looking for. Was Jazz and her group, they did a project and they had to pivot midstream. And she talked about that. She talked about the insight, and then she talked about the solution. So that's one. The second part was that pivot actually caused a better outcome, and she was able to describe how that insight created a better design that created a better outcome for the user, right, and the end deliverable. And so I think that was a beautiful answer. And we have to think that in a one-on-one, it isn't about what you're presenting on the screen anymore. You already did your kind of portfolio review. This is your opportunity to really have an engaging one-on-one conversation with a person who is specifically asking you your thoughts and your experiences and how they relate to the question that has been asked, right? So great answer.
Very insightful. Thanks.
Yeah.
James, do you want to give a mock interview question to Hansen? See how?
Sure.
Yeah.
And for everybody on the call, this is really the first time that Hansen and I have actually met outside of texting each other. So
it's a real interview.
Yeah, so this is really a cold one. So, okay. Given a specific time frame, like say a week-long sprint, a month-long, project, or an extended, 3 to 6 month semester type of project, how would you allocate and break down your approach towards an ambiguous problem space, right?
Yeah, this is very, very familiar. This problem is something that I think you always have to deal with in research. And I guess the project that I'll be talking about would also coming from the student perspective, using my capstone project as an example. And in this capstone project, we actually was working to design a solution for parents to arrange flexible caregiving opportunities for the child. So we're arranging childcare opportunities for the parents using whatever solutions that our designers will come up throughout that whole design process. So as a researcher in that project, I really had to deal with, come up with research problems alongside with my designers and our sponsors to work out what are the questions that we're asking. And there was a lot of ambiguity in the beginning of what that end solution looked like, right? But in the beginning, we were really trying to understand what the actual problem that we're solving as a team and where we can move forward as a team as well. So, but basically, to answer your questions about time frame, I think that was a conversation we had as a team to kind of really hone into how much time do we have as a team. And because this was a capstone project, we had more time than maybe like a month-long project or maybe like a quarter-long project. We had 2 quarters. So this is when I think as a researcher, you have time to work on, and this is something that we love because then we can start planning. So here I'm just going to share my screen briefly. And using this diagram really quickly, we, as a researcher, we kind of figured out what stages our team is in. So in terms of research, there are usually 2 types of research, right? Generative research and evaluative research. In the generative side, we're really diving into the bigger sets of problem that the team is moving towards, whereas the second type, evaluative research, we're looking into evaluating our existing solutions that we've designed, right? So in this project, I think since we have a little bit more time, we can dig really deeper into that generative side and really ask questions to our users and also our stakeholders what problems they are experiencing in relationship to parenting and also arranging care options. So we did focus groups. And using these focus groups, we were able to find out what the pain points are with parents, and then moving into that design process and with the designers and coming up with mock-ups and prototypes to test it out later on in that next quarter to evaluate that prototype. So was that a lot? Was that too much?
No, that's good. That was good. So, so we asked 2 different types of questions, right? The first question that we asked Jazz was really about customer focus, right? That was the candidate able to demonstrate being focused on customer needs? And Jazz's answer of her being able to pivot based off of real-time input is exactly the type of thing that we're looking for. And in Hanson's case, that question was not necessarily about allocating time. It was actually an analytical problem-solving question. The time constraint was, how did he decide to utilize the time, right? And so his answer was great because he showed that we took the extra time to focus on generative research. And this is what we did with that extra time. If I had, more time, what I'd start to dive into is, well, what was the outcome of that generative research? And then I would lead into the type of question that I asked Jazz about kind of, okay, well, then what insights did you uncover and how did that change the rest of your project, right? And so those are just, two really great examples of how to answer these kind of ambiguous, open-ended questions. Right?
Well, now, if any of you ever interview with James, you have a major advantage. So, anyway, yeah, and we just allocated a lot. We're actually on time for lots of Q&A because I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of questions. So do you want to just turn on your screen and ask your question, or type it in the chat? Just feel free to just talk. Anybody? No question is silly. I know there's tons of questions deep down. Somebody put one in the chat.
I can ask a question. What about like when you maybe got brought in for like a piece of something, but you weren't on a project from start to finish? Is that okay for putting in your portfolio? Do you have any tips about how to present that?
I guess James would be the right person for that, right?
Yeah. It's always, well, one, you want to be authentic and genuine, to say, here is a project that I worked on. It was a group project. Here's my role and what I was responsible for. And here's how I interfaced with the rest of the team, right? So that's one. I would say that's the best way to approach it, so that you define your role and you define the outcomes of your contributions within that role.
Thanks. Here's another one. How do you get better at depicting your UX process? Better at storytelling process and the impact, rather than just saying what you did? How do you improve on that process? That's a good question. Is that another one for James?
I think I think we all could answer that differently. What I have found is really practicing your presentation and what you're presenting, your projects, and knowing them inside and out, right? Getting second and third opinions of knowledgeable folks, right? So it's one thing to, I'm just going to say this facetiously, presenting to my parents who love me and will, say, oh, that's great, you did great. It's another thing presenting a project to somebody who will be providing really helpful, constructive criticism, right? And I think it's important for you to find those constructive criticism type of things. The other thing is if you feel like you are presenting, well, one thing I would say is this is not a CSA type of presentation, meaning that everything that comes out of my mouth is actually what's typed on the screen. This is your opportunity to describe the work on the screen, to talk about it. It's a reference to a story that you're telling. And the link that I put in the chat is exactly about that, right? I think that asking yourself, like, what did I learn? What was the key takeaway? That's another thing that I think is important, is how do you be succinct in talking about what you're presenting? Is here's what I did, and here's the key takeaway. We did this research and blah. And based off of that, I was able to blah, right? It's really kind of honing that over time. And, that's where presenting to folks to get feedback comes in.
Okay, thanks. This is maybe something for Chelsea. Do you have any insights for people shifting their careers? I actually know we have a lot of students, master's students, who are pivoters, career pivoters. Is there a good way to apply this to interviews, your portfolio, etc.? Chelsea?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is like be confident in yourself and your skills, because Microsoft really does value diversity, and just the fact that you're a career pivoter makes your profile even that much more interesting, to know, okay, well, what skills are there from your former trade that could add new insight into the field that you're going into. So if if there is any way you can draw parallels from previous skills, definitely draw those and don't hide the fact that you are a career pivoter. And then, I mean, the other thing is, yeah, if you do feel like, oh my gosh, I only have this like 1 year of, you know, coursework in UX, that's where those mentors and professors and like valued opinions that James was talking about, that's where you really want to bring those folks in to review your portfolio, practice your elevator pitch with them, all of that. Just like use the resources that you guys have. I know UW is really doing a lot to try to support people going in into new fields. So use those resources.
Chelsea, for those students who maybe they came right from undergrad and went to master's, or maybe they're in undergrad and they don't have a lot of work experience, do you suggest like building your portfolio by doing volunteer work or some designing for good? Or
yeah, I mean, yes, like literally anywhere where you can get a practical project to add to your portfolio is great. Like, don't worry about whether you're getting paid or not paid, or whether it's your family, friends, company that needs UX work, or if it's how someone asked about like big companies. And yeah, like obviously there's like name brand and name recognition that come from big companies and the tech industry and all of that, and that's great to see. But as long as the practical skills are applied in your projects, we try not to discriminate, you know, on company name, right? It's really about like what's in your portfolio and what skills did you use. That's much more important.
Thank you. And thank you for answering that second question that I was about to get to, Chelsea. And that, I guess, go to Chelsea again. How should a student approach applying for a position that they don't necessarily meet all the requirements for?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing to know is that tons of people are applying for positions that they don't meet all the requirements for. So never let that stop you. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and you may not recognize it in yourself, but just know that, yeah, you don't have to meet all the requirements by any means. We're very much leaning into, you know, what are the key skills that are necessary, and a lot of hiring managers go a little crazy with long lists of skills, when really in reality there's core skills that may be more, you know, more necessary than others. So yeah, I guess the biggest tip is do read through the requirements, and if you meet a few of them, definitely consider applying and make those very obvious on your resume. Like, I always recommend people slightly modify your resume per the job that you're applying for, like with the keywords that you're seeing. Put those keywords in your portfolio and in your resume, so that recruiters like me who don't know like all the keywords all the time, but I see like, oh, someone says AI, that, oh, this is AI too. Okay, like we're getting somewhere, you know? So if you have that experience, definitely bring it out in the wording that you're using.
Thanks, great answer. Any thoughts on UX portfolio versus research portfolio? I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean doing them? Sarah, can you talk? Can you say it? Where are you saying?
Yeah, I've heard in practice, like depending on which role you're interested in, whether you're applying as a designer or a visual designer, a UX designer, or a research role, or, you know, something that has a whole combo of all those positions. Like, should you create, I assume you don't want to just create one portfolio, but what are your thoughts on having like, this is my UX portfolio, and this is my research portfolio, and it's ugly because I only need to focus on research. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on that, or in practice, is that not really a thing?
I've seen people blend it, usually be on one website, that they have like two different tabs essentially. So that's one way I've seen it. I will say for the university positions that I'm hiring for, I can't speak for all the teams at Microsoft, and these guys may have some extra insight, but definitely the ones I've hired for, usually the researchers, it's pretty common that researchers don't have portfolios, because a lot of times we're looking at their like academic experiences and like just the papers and things that they've worked on. So it can sometimes be a little less important for the research positions, but for the design positions, I mean, yeah, like you have to have that visual work represented, and that's a core part of our review process.
I love how you transitioned right into this next question, Chelsea. The question is, for someone transitioning from academic research to UX research, any thoughts on how to demonstrate impact for academic research projects? I don't know if that you hire for those types of roles, Chelsea, or maybe that's a James question. Or maybe we can't answer today, I don't know.
I think Hansen put in a good answer to that. So, academic versus, UX, I think that it's really about the methodologies, I think. And were you able to extract insights and, to Hansen's point, communicate and defend them, right? And what was the outcome of the research that you created? Those things still apply to UX based research, and those are that's the narrative that you want to, that's the story that you want to tell, right? And so it's about impact, insights, impact, and outcomes. So can you tell your story that way and make that research apply? And do you have enough experience doing the type of qual and quant methodologies that are more applicable to UX, right? So that's my recommendation.
Okay, thanks. This is a fun one. I'll ask Chelsea this. Are there any applicants that you specifically remember, and why? Who really stands out? Maybe positive and negative.
Negative when people don't put their graduation date on their resume. That's like, it's such a minor weird thing, but like we don't know what position to qualify for you for unless you have your anticipated graduation month and year on your resume. So it's like a random tip I try to tell everyone. Put it on there, it really matters. Positive, honestly, I think when I talk to design managers and we're going through people's portfolios, they get really excited when they see like customized work on the portfolio, that someone's not just using a template. If you have any like coding experience and you want to showcase that in your web portfolio, definitely do, because it's really interesting to see people experiment with that. Yeah, and just like when the passion shines through, I think the projects too, like you can tell if someone, again, is just like templating, oh, I need to put a research section, I need to put a finding section, etc. And they're just going section by section and checking the box, versus someone who is really thoughtful about why this project mattered and what was the impact on the customer and all of that. So
Great. The other one, I think we've kind of already covered. What are some common critical mistakes in interviews for applying for a designer research position? I think we kind of covered a lot of these, but maybe there's something that somebody else can think of. I'll throw this out to Hansen and Jazz, to anybody, like any other mistakes or any big no-nos that really are difficult for you. If not, if you don't have any answers, that's okay too, because there's one more question.
Yeah, somebody just coming in and presenting a lecture on design process is just
Not good.
not good.
Okay, how about you, Chelsea, when you talk to someone, like maybe not just the date on the resume, but is there anything when you're talking to somebody and screening someone that really just makes you think, okay, this person isn't the right fit?
yeah, I think it is important, because I know people, like, they try to get interviews with a lot of big companies. I think it it's important to know like why you're applying to that specific company, and like why you're applying to the design division of that specific company, right? So it's definitely obvious, again, from the I know passion's like a way overused term, but it's obvious when someone's really passionate about the position, versus like, oh, they're just trying to get some interview experience or trying to get a big company name on their resume. So doing that extra 20 minutes of research of what's going on at X company in the design division, and oh, usually we wouldn't tell you who you're interviewing with, but if you are ever working with a company that does tell you who they're interviewing with, you know, looking them up on LinkedIn and seeing what projects they're doing ahead of time, can be, you know, show that you're really going above and beyond on those calls.
Thanks. Well, I feel like this is kind of, we should really stop instead of getting involved in another question. I just want to respect everybody's time, since it's maybe dinner time or family time or playtime for you. So I just want to thank everyone for this terrific panel. Thank you, James and Hanson and Jazz and Chelsea. Maybe there's some resources later on that I could send to everybody. We did record this. Yeah, I just want to thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.